All right, everybody, welcome back to Vuln Vibes, the cybersecurity podcast where we like to dig into the latest and greatest vulnerabilities and exploits.
And sometimes not so greatest.
That's right. Sometimes they're just downright scary, and folks, today's episode falls squarely into that category.
Yeah, buckle up.
We're talking about a freshly discovered exploit hitting Microsoft Configuration Manager.
You might know it as MCM.
Exactly. And this one's got folks, we're talking proof of concept code floating around out there in the wild, a CVSS score that will make your hair stand on end, and a whole lot of potential for mayhem.
Yeah, this is one you do not want to miss.
So let's not waste any time. Let's dive right in and unpack this beast.
All right, so we're talking about CVE-2024-43468. And let me tell you, this one's a real doozy.
I'm already getting nervous just hearing you say that. So for our listeners who might be new to the world of MCM, can you give us a quick rundown of what it is and why it's such a big deal?
Sure thing. So imagine you're an IT admin, right? And you've got hundreds or maybe even thousands of computers on your network that you need to manage.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It can be, but that's where MCM comes in. It's basically a centralized control panel that lets you manage all those machines from one place.
So you can like push out software updates and security patches and stuff like that.
Exactly. It's super powerful, and that's precisely what makes it so attractive to attackers.
Because if they can compromise MCM, they basically gain control over the entire network.
It's like getting the master key to the kingdom.
Not good at all. So let's talk about this vulnerability, CVE-2024-43468.
Well, the CVSS score is 9.8 out of 10.
Out of 10.
Yep, which puts it in the critical category.
That sounds bad.
It means this thing is seriously exploitable.
So what makes this particular vulnerability so dangerous? What's the root cause of all this trouble?
At its core, it all boils down to good old-fashioned SQL injection.
SQL injection.
Yeah, MCM relies on a database to store all its configuration data, and this vulnerability allows an attacker to basically sneak in malicious code into that database. Through specific commands sent to the server, it's like slipping a note under the door when nobody's watching.
And that note can contain instructions to do all sorts of nasty things.
Precisely. They can bypass security measures, steal data, or even take control of the server itself.
Okay, I think I'm starting to understand the severity here, but for those of us who aren't exactly code wizards, can you break down what SQL injection is in simpler terms?
Sure, think of it like this. You've got a website with a login form, right? You enter your username and password, and that information gets sent to a database to check if you're legit.
Right.
But with SQL injection, an attacker can mess with the code in that form and trick the database into letting them in without actually knowing the password.
It's like picking the lock on the digital front door.
Exactly.
So in the case of MCM, this vulnerability creates a similar kind of backdoor into the system.
Precisely. And to make matters worse, the vulnerability lies within a service called mPlocation, which is responsible for communication between client devices and the MCM server.
So it's a pretty crucial component.
Absolutely, and the vulnerability specifically affects two operations: get machine ID and get content ID.
What do those do?
They're used to identify and retrieve information from client devices, but the way they handle data input makes them susceptible to manipulation.
You mean an attacker could use these operations to inject their malicious code?
Bingo, and here's the kicker. Neither of these operations requires authentication.
Hold on. You're saying anyone can just waltz in and exploit this thing?
Pretty much, yeah, it's wide open.
And to add insult to injury, there's proof of concept code publicly available.
Yeah, someone's gone and created a step-by-step guide on how to exploit this thing.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
It's not good.
So we've got a critical vulnerability, easy to exploit attack vectors, and a publicly available how-to guide. This is starting to sound like a cybersecurity nightmare.
It kind of is.
What kind of damage are we talking about here if someone actually manages to exploit this thing?
Well, for starters, they could gain full control over the entire configuration manager database. Yep. They could execute commands on the server, steal sensitive data, and potentially even use it as a launching pad to compromise other systems on the network.
This is bad, really bad. All right. So what can our listeners do to protect themselves? How do we slam the door shut on this thing?
The most important thing is to patch your systems immediately.
Immediately?
Yeah, Microsoft released patches for this vulnerability as part of their October 2024 Patch Tuesday updates.
Okay, so if you haven't already, go get those patches, folks. They're your first line of defense.
Absolutely.
But what if someone's already been compromised? How easy is it to detect this kind of attack?
Detecting SQL injection attacks can be a little tricky. They often don't leave obvious footprints in your typical log files.
So how do you know if you've been hit?
Well, there are some specific error messages related to the get machine ID operation that might show up in the MP location log file.
So if you see those red flags, start investigating.
Exactly.
All right, folks, another item for your security checklist, check those MP location log files.
This whole situation really underscores the importance of proactive security measures.
It's like having a security system for your house. You don't wait for a break-in to install it.
Exactly. You got to be prepared.
So to recap, we have a critical vulnerability in a tool used by countless organizations, easy to exploit attack vectors, publicly available, exploit code, and the potential for some very serious damage.
That's the bad news.
But the good news is that patches are available, and there are steps we can take to detect and prevent attacks.
That's the good news.
And it's a good reminder that cybersecurity is an ongoing process. You can't just set it and forget it.
You got to stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay ahead of the bad guys.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll wrap things up for today.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of cybersecurity.
Stay safe out there, folks, and keep those systems patched.
We'll catch you next time on Vuln Vibes.
See ya.
Bye.